There we go. I want to welcome everyone to my conversation with Jacob from Big Red Stripe. Um, he was one of the first YouTubers I learned screenwriting from, and so I wanted to share him with you. He's got a lot of great knowledge, and I think he's a great guy. He's got great stuff. I'll link his video and also all his courses and stuff below in the description, or I'll have him pinned in the first comment, one of the two. And I just wanted to as you guys know, I like to, we don't always get a chance to just talk to other screenwriters. I think it's also neat so people can see everybody has a unique journey when they go on their screenwriting journey. It's not one size fits all. And so I think it's important that we hear conversations about how everybody gets to where they're at and, um, and just to see all the different flavors of people in terms of screenwriting. Jacob, thank you very much for coming tonight.
You're
Um,
welcome.
and so, why don't we just start talking about? Why don't you give a little bit to my audience about who you are and a little bit about your screenwriting journey?
So Jacob Michael, uh, I've I guess probably the who I am and kind of things probably will roll out of my screenwriting journey a little bit better. But I do have a YouTube channel, Big Red Stripe. I kind of been around the business for 15-ish years now, doing lots of different things, which we can talk about and get into if you want more details of stuff. Um, Paul, so just feel free to ask if you're like, no, I need to pull on this thread. Um, Writing for me, my writing journey, and I'm not gonna like dive into all the details, but I will mention kind of loosely started when I was in first grade. I remember, like, I don't really hardly remember anything about first grade. I remember my teacher's name, Mrs. Bulig, and I remember this one particular assignment we did, which not everybody in first grade got to do it. We had to write some stuff and we got picked. And I ended up being able to kind of, this is going to sound way more glamorous than it is. It's first grade. But I wrote a little story and illustrated it, and it was bound into a book. I'm sure my mom still got it in the attic somewhere. Um, and I don't remember hardly anything about that story or anything except I remember the cover was like light blue, and I just loved it. And I've always loved stories. And at that time, so first grade, so I was 5 or 6. I remember when I was 5, that summer, standing in line with my dad to go see the first Star Wars when it came out. Like I distinctly remember that. Uh, like a lot of people my age, Star Wars had a profound impact because it was so different uh, than than what you would normally see in the theaters. And then when I was in 11th grade, really my creative writing kind of started. I had a teacher, Mrs. Civarolo, Mrs. C, we called her, and she gave us, we were reading Huckleberry Finn, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and she gave us this assignment where you had to create a newspaper. And it had to include, there were so many different things. It was one of those group projects, and usually group projects kind of stink. But this one, I just kind of took a lot of the creative stuff and just ran with it, just writing little stories or, you know, whatever stuff was in there. I don't even really remember all of it. I do remember the assignment, and I remember falling in love with creative writing. I didn't know how that was going to manifest itself. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Um, but I loved it. Um, when I was in college, I had some assignments, creative writing assignments that were like always super fun. I always liked doing those. But I started to think like, okay, I think I probably need to write novels. That's probably what I am gonna eventually do. And so I kind of started trying to do that. I remember I wrote started writing a novel when I was an undergrad, and then, over some time, it was about 2 years or so, kind of finished. Um, and that was super fun. And I started a couple of others, and I still probably have manuscripts somewhere. they were bad. They're so bad. Um, but I was like, I kind of like this, but it wasn't my thing. I don't like all the flowery and um superfluous language that comes with a lot of uh what I would kind of call hoity-toity novel writing, which they teach a lot in schools, like, short stories and all this and lots of words, and there's like nothing that happens. And it's like, that's fine, but not really where my interests were. And but I still liked writing, and I eventually decided I was going to do a master's degree in English because I love teaching. I've always loved teaching, and I knew I was like, okay, if I get a master's degree, I'm probably going to need a terminal degree if I want to teach in college at some point. So I started on the master's degree in English, but I took every creative writing class I could, every film class I could. So they gave me like a creative writing emphasis, I think. Um, but in the course of all of that, I found one particular book. Now, this is, there's probably a lot of you watching that are not going to remember this. Paul, I don't know if you're going to remember this or some version of this, but there used to be way back in the day, and it started with music that you'd get a little mailer thing in the mail, and back when people actually like read the mail, and then it was basically a get 10 albums, 5 albums, whatever it was for, 20 cents, 19 cents, right? 99 cents, whatever it was. You just got to buy like 3 more over the next 2, 3 years.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people that did that. Well, there was also some of those with books. And there was one, it was like, $1.99 for 6 books, and you got to buy 2 more. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to like find 8 books and just get my 6 and then pick 2 more, and do it. And one of the ones that I ended up getting, because I've kind of got to the end, I was like, I don't know which other one. And there was a book by J. Michael Straczynski called Script Writing.
Hmm.
And that was the first screenwriting book I had. And that totally changed my world. I had no idea what it was really. I mean, I knew about screenwriting, but I was like, it felt so far away from me. I felt too foreign. So um, as soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh, this is it. Because it was, streamlined things and story emphasis and all that. And um, it was really, really fascinating. And so at that point, I started finding all the books I could find about screenwriting, which was basically about 6 at the time.
Yeah.
Over the years, a few more started trickling in. And then there were some others, that were, playwriting and things like that, that were kind of helpful, at least as far as like character or how stories kind of work, but stories on a stage and stories for the screen, the story is the same. Stories are stories.
Mhm.
The medium is very different. The storytelling itself is very different. So I was just trying to like consume everything I could about screenwriting. And the 2 things, well, 3 things really that I wanted desperately. I wanted to know, what are the tools of screenwriting? Like I didn't like, what do I have available? What can help me tell a story? And not just the tools, but like, how do I even structure a story? Like, how does that work? How do these stories work? Because it's not a novel. It's not a graphic novel. It's not a comic book. It's not like, I don't know what it is. So that was one. I really want to know the tools. I really wanted to know the process, because the things that I was trying to write took me so freaking long to write. And I was like, this has to be faster. There's no way anybody can make a living doing this, writing one script in 2 years. Like, there's no way. I got to figure out how to hone my process. And part of that was, I need to know what tools are available and what are different strategies and how are other people doing it. So, there's planning things like note cards and all that kind of stuff, which I had no idea. Um, and then the third thing was I wanted feedback on my writing, because there was nobody around that I knew. I was living in Michigan at the time. You said you're in Minnesota. It's kind of the same thing. It's like there was nobody there. So it's like, how do I do this, and I would read my script, and I could find a few scripts, but it was hard to find scripts then. I mean, when I started screenwriting, the internet was like so new. It was like dial-up email and all. So I couldn't like just go find a script. I had to go to a library and maybe they had one. The school I was going to for my master's degree, they had a few scripts, but they were production scripts and they were older, Godfather, 70s. And like script writing now is very different than what it used to be. So I was just having trouble. I wanted those things, but I was like, okay, I can't do anything about it right now. And, I was just learning what I could. And I got to the point where it was like, okay, I can't learn anything else on my own. If I'm going to do this, I've either got to figure it out on my own or I need to go get some help
Mhm.
because I really loved it. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to go to screenwriting school. I always wanted a terminal degree. Um, an MFA is a terminal degree in creative arts. So I was like, I'm going to go get an MFA. If nothing else happens, at minimum, I'll be able to teach, and that'll be great because I always wanted to teach. And so I was going to apply to schools in uh, New York and in California and LA because that's where the best schools were at the time. And my late wife at the time, she was like, I'm not moving to New York. And I was like, California it is. So applied to schools in California and got into USC. And so we moved out here. Um, but as people know, like film school's expensive. It's expensive. Um, and I kept, learning after school. When I was in school, I did some editing, which got me some jobs. So I was producing a show and editing a show, editing a couple of shows. And then I got in editing commercials and all that kind of stuff. So I did like several seasons of The Simpsons and um, let's see, CSI and Bob's Burgers. So like I did, several shows and doing commercials and then, some trailers here on the side and behind the scenes stuff. And all that was fine and fun. And I loved it. And it gave me a lot of opportunities and got to meet a lot of people, but I still was writing all along. Um, I eventually ended up teaching at Pepperdine for a few years. I taught filmmaking and storytelling there. And while I was there, rewrote their whole film degree. It's now called Screen Arts. That's got my fingerprints all over it. Um, so, that was a really good opportunity that I had. Um, it was hard. There's a lot of things that are happening at Pepperdine makes it hard. So I can't really go into a lot of that, but um,
How long did you end
so
up teaching for?
do I?
How long did you teach for?
So I taught at Pepperdine. I taught 4 years full time. Um, but I taught adjunct several years before that. So I taught there and taught writing at another university in town, which most people probably haven't heard of. Um, so, um, so yeah, and I love teaching. I still miss teaching college. I miss the students. I miss the excitement and the thrill, um, and just all the fun things. Had lots of opportunities. Got to go film couple of short films in Australia with some students, got to, film in and around LA. And so just a lot of fun things. A lot of my students had films that, went into Cannes and other film festivals and, so just lots of things. And, that was a really great thing. But when I stopped teaching, I was like, man, I miss teaching. I still want to teach and I love it. Um, and I, f- I mean, people have told me I'm pretty good. I feel like I'm pretty good. I don't know. I guess I'm pretty good. But I love it. So I like helping people. I like, uh, just helping people find their way and especially, find their way w- with some things that I wish I had had. So, the tools, honing the process, getting feedback, like those are the things that I mostly do. And, it's because I'm trying to help beginning intermediate writers that are trying to get their scripts up to the level that is like, hey, this is more an advanced level. now you can start submitting. Now you're gonna like be able to, be taken seriously as a writer, uh, and all that. So, and I still write and submit things. I'm trying to finish a script right now that's an older script I'm updating, but I sent it out several years back, and it got me a lot of meetings and lots of stuff that happened, but nothing ever formalized. So I've got that one. And you kind of like when you have scripts that kind of go out and they kind of hit for a while and then things kind of fizzle out, and there's lots of reasons for that. You just kind of like put them on the back burner, and then 5, 10 years later, jump it out again. So that one I'm working on getting out again. I've had stuff super close to getting bought and greenlit. Um, I had a TV show that was like a final two with CBS, and they ended up going with another show, which was kind of a bummer for me, of course, for lots of reasons. But it was a double bummer because that show that they picked up was not as good, and it didn't last a season. I don't know if mine would have lasted longer. I would like to think it would have, but it was just a, it wasn't a great way to do that show. Um, so, which was a bummer. And, that show may come up at some point again, but, right now it's still kind of hidden away. But I know I have a producer that's attached to it that still occasionally mentions it to people. So he'll call me or email me every once in a while.
Awesome.
Lots of script options and meetings and contracts. Just, the stars don't align. And, I think a lot of it's what a lot of aspiring writers don't understand. They think like, oh, I just got to have a good story. And it's like, well, that's like 5%, really. Like having a production worthy script. I don't mean like a script that you could just go and shoot, because you're not writing a script to sell. You're not writing a script to shoot. You're writing a script to sell. So, you gotta have that for sure, but that's like 30%. That doesn't get you all the way. Like you've got to have the personality. You got to be able to sell yourself. You got to be able to pitch things. You got to be able to communicate with people. You got to be able to take notes. You got to be able to understand story and go back and forth and let go of things and not hold things so tight. And, there's so many things, and there's so many things that have to be right for something not to just get sold, but to then get made. And literally one little thing, which many of which are beyond your control as a writer, can just derail the whole project. And that totally stinks. It totally stinks. But sometimes that happens. A lot of times that happens. There's a lot of writers that, be like, oh yeah, I've got stuff. And, I'm working professionally as a writer. And you're like, well, what I want to watch something you've written. Like, you can't watch anything I've written because nothing's been made.
Right.
And that happens a lot. People are like, oh, I'm gonna, I don't see a whole lot on their IMDb, so they must be bad. And it's like, IMDb is only talking about the production. It's not talking about all the other stuff that's going on. And, there's a lot of things that happen in Hollywood that are behind the scenes that people just don't see. They just see the movies or the TV shows that come out. They don't see all the other machinations going on behind. And there's a lot of politics, and, some new head of studio comes in, and it doesn't matter how many movies they had on the slate, and they could have been like great ones. And it's like, nope, that was my predecessor. They're all gone. And now off to so that happens. And it's like, it's so frustrating as a writer, but yet you just have to like, okay, that's how it is. And you just kind of gotta roll with it. I mean, that's just how life happens. So you gotta move along. So that's a very long, windy way, but kind of probably gets at, a lot of, why I'm passionate about screenwriting, what I love about it, and why I do what I do, and how I got where I'm at. So there you go. So
No, I think
short question, really long answer.
that's good. No, that's what we're looking for, because, like I said, I think you had a lot of wonderful nuggets in that. I think too, especially talking to beginning screenwriters who think, well, I have this killer story, and it should get made, and you just explained, well, yeah, what happens if the head of the studio who bought that decided, hey, I got to leave and go somewhere else? The next guy's going to be like, we're going to shelf this.
Yep. Yep.
It could be the best kick-ass story ever,
Yep.
and it's going to
That's
sit.
it. Yep. That's it. And that happens a lot. And, so there's just there's a lot of those kinds of things that happen. And, you wish you could control it, but you just can't. It's not like other industries, where, oh, somebody does something. Well, because you've done the thing, well, now the next thing will happen. It's like, that's not really how film works. It's just not. And if you're gonna try to figure out Hollywood, you have to be at peace with that. Or you got to go the independent film route. Like that's a totally viable route, but it's a very different route. And it's not one I want to do. I don't want to, you know, produce and maybe direct down the road because I do kind of like being on set. I like that part. But do I have to? No, I do like the writing. I like creating it. I like figuring it out. So, if you're going to work in that system, you got to be at peace with how it works and you got to play within the system. And, I hear a lot of new writers are like, oh, well, no, that's not how it should work. And I'm going to do XYZ. And it's like, that's cool. Everybody's going to ignore you though. Like, that's just, I'm sorry. That's just how it's going to play out. So,
So talking about that a little bit in terms of Hollywood, how do you, because when we're doing this particular interview, they just had one of the worst openings for Memorial Day in the last 30, 40 years with Furiosa coming out. Hollywood, I hear a lot of times is sort of on the rocks that they don't know what to do. How do you see Hollywood in the next 5 to 10 years?
so, like most industries, Hollywood is cyclical, runs on cycles. Um, Now, there is new tech that opens up new doors for sure. Like you could look back at the streaming uh, service and just the, you know, immense nature of it now. It's like, how many subscriptions do I have? Because it used to be like, oh, I'm going to cancel cable and just subscribe to a streaming service. And now it's like, I'm spending as much as I was when I had cable because I've got all these streaming services. So new tech does open new doors. But the creative cycles tend to be the same. And there's always ups and downs and lulls and things like that. And right now, there's a lot of pressure from consumers to generate, they want some original stories. Now I don't mean um, inherently unique stories. Hollywood has never liked unique stories. Never have, never will.
Correct.
It's a money thing. Hollywood is a business. It's a money thing. Hollywood likes familiar stories that have a new take. So it's like, oh, okay, this feels familiar, but this also feels different and new. Okay, Hollywood's going to like that. If it's totally new, they're not going to like it. That's an independent film. And the independent films that do well, then Hollywood is like, oh, okay, there's an audience for that. I can generate X number of dollars in revenue. So we're going to try to replicate some of that. And they'll, kind of do some of those things. But in general, a lot of consumers just generally are tired of the same IP or intellectual property, or they're at least tired of the same types of stories within those IPs. Like, you know, I'm a big Marvel fan. I love all the Marvel movies. I think the Captain America movies, honestly, are like awesome. All three of them, they're great. Um, but all the Marvel movies started to feel similar. They all started to, especially after Endgame, they were all, it's kind of like I've seen this movie before. I've already seen that. Um, and that's not really what you want. And so they're like, okay, well, let's, we'll go back to old TV shows or we'll go back to old movies and we're going to remake them. And there's lots of that. The problem is consumers are like, and we're done. And Hollywood's a business. And similar things happened back in the 70s.
Hmm.
The 70s, there was a lot of remakes, a lot of movies based on books. Some of them did really well, Godfather. Um, a lot of them didn't. And people were just getting tired of they were just like, eh. And then all of a sudden the 80s rolled around. Star Wars kind of started. That was an independent film mostly. I mean, Fox was associated, but George Lucas was kind of doing his own thing and making his own rules. And there were other films that started, and all of a sudden there's like all these new scripts and lots of new IP was created because of the movies back in the 80s that were given a chance. So things like Aliens and Terminator and Die Hard, and you can go on and on and on. And I kind of feel like that's probably going to be the move in the next 10 years or so. There's probably going to be more attempts and more focus on quality stories than on pre-existing IP. They're going to be looking at a story and like, can this be something that we could make a sequel with? Now, you should not, I hope everybody listening hears me on this. Do not write a movie that intentionally has a sequel. That's pompous and arrogant, and you don't know the business part. Like, just leave that to somebody else. If your movie does well, they're going to talk to you about writing a sequel. But you got to have that in mind when you're creating it. Could this be a sequel? Could there be another one
Mhm.
like this or in this world? Because if it does hit, they are going to want to make another one because there's going to be a built-in audience, and that's something that they love. So I kind of feel like there's going to start to be a more push to just looking for more quality scripts that could become something as opposed to something based on something. Or at least things that are not as well known. So if somebody, if you've written a novel that's done well, but nobody has film rights, like write the screenplay for it and, try to shop that. It's like, hey, I've got some IP, but people don't know about it as much yet. That could be a thing. Um, so that would be my guess. I could be totally wrong. Because again, I'm not the business person, but just looking at the cycles, that's kind of how it tends to go. There tends to be seasons where they're not buying a lot of spec scripts and then seasons where they're buying a lot and while they're trying to do things. In the last, 4 or 5 years, they've not bought a lot, before uh, you know, before 2020, all the fun stuff that happened with there. They were spec scripts were, I think, around 150 to 200 a year they were buying. And since then, they bought like less than 10 a
Mhm.
year, a couple of years. So like it's super way down. So I mean, my guess is they'll probably start doing that. But Hollywood follows the feet. If the feet aren't going to the theaters, then they're going to change things and do something different. There'll be a course correct, at least as far as film. TV is a whole other world. Like right now, it's just a hodgepodge, and I love good TV,
Mhm.
but the networks honestly have kind of worked themselves into a hole because they've kind of only wanted to work with established showrunners at networks, which is fine. But how the system used to work was within a show, when let's say you and I were writers on a TV show and you wrote an episode. When your episode was time to film, you were now not in the writer's room. You were out on set and you were working with the director. And so you were seeing all the other stuff. You were learning all the other decisions that had to be made. You were responsible for managing, in a sense, the budget for that particular episode and, this and that, because you're learning under the showrunner who's responsible for all of it, who are all writers, by the way, in TV. And TV writers are king and film directors are king. But in TV, the writers are. But the problem is the networks only want to work with established writers. And then the streaming services where writers are like, ooh, there's more opportunity, and there is. The problem is it's a limited series, and they tend to write the show, like they might be writing from March through May, and then they go shoot it in the summer, but the writers are already moved on. So the showrunner's still around, but there's no new writers that are learning the craft. There's no one that's kind of coming behind. So there's right now starting to be this massive skill gap between showrunners who have been around a while and know how to run a show, and all these new writers that are coming in who don't know how to run a show. And so that's why you get this mixed bag of quality in TV. And it's, hit or miss. It's mostly miss because people think, oh, it's 8 episodes, it's 6 episodes. I'm going to write a 6 hour movie. I'm going to write an 8 hour movie and just chop it into pieces and it'll be fine. It's like, okay, on one hand, it's fine, but that's not how stories work. Like, you still need a complete story in each episode. And if you've taken a whole story, an 8 hour story, and chopped it into pieces, you just have 8 pieces. You don't have 8 stories. You have 8 pieces of one story. And those shows don't do very well. People don't like them. A really great example. And I know a writer who was on the show. And so I hate saying this, and it's throwing somebody under the bus, but everybody knows the Lord of the Rings show
Yeah.
was horrible. It was horrible because it was an 8 hour movie chopped up into pieces. And a lot of the writers knew, but the people in charge didn't. And so it's like, there's lots of issues with TV right now. So my guess is film's going to sort of auto-correct. There'll be a course correction with film in the next 10 years, and then that'll filter down into TV after that. So, because what will happen is a lot of the TV writers that aren't getting opportunities, they're going to see there's opportunity in the film, and they're going to start trying to jump over to that. And so that'll leave a gap, and then they'll have to rethink, how are we doing TV? And then it'll start to sort itself out. But, everything's just cyclical anyway. So I have a feeling it'll
Work its
come
way out.
around. But yeah, but it's, there's, there's lots of opportunity, and there's lots of international opportunity right now, so, it's not that screenwriting is going away anytime soon. Like, it's not. But the mediums might be different, or where the opportunities are is different, but people love visual stories. We just do, because we love stories. That's part of what it is being human. We love stories. And so I don't think, stories aren't going away. The industry isn't going away. It might change. It might have some growing pains, but I think there'll be some more opportunities in film in the coming years, more so than in TV. But I don't know if I
Now,
had a crystal ball,
do you have
but just,
a preference on what you like to write? Do you like movie writing better or TV writing better?
so I love TV writing. I'm not too old to be on staff in a writer's room. I'm not too old to run a show. Sometimes I don't know if I have the energy to do it anymore. I'm not like old. But so I'm 52.
Mhm.
So, what's funny is, like, a lot of the TV shows, they have a lot of things, and a lot of this is for very good reason, for very good reasons that, it's just, um, historical and just lots of reasons. So a lot of shows, they try to make their writing staff diverse.
Mhm.
And so that includes everything from race, gender, sexual preference, like all of them. But one of the things is, now, because I'm over 50, I would be considered a diversity hire. So that's kind of funny to me. That cracks me up. So, it's TV is a younger person's game, because part of it's just the nature of the work, and that, because it's such a fast turnaround and things. So, I still know people that are in their 60s that write TV and love it and do that. And uh, so it's not that you can't. And in some ways, the older you are, there might be more opportunities in TV. But just from where I've been at the last several years, I've been more writing features. So that's more what I've written. The thing I'm working on right now is a feature. Um, and because I kind of feel like it's where the industry is going to go, I'm just trying to make sure I've got some features. I do have some TV stuff, but I really like Really like writing TV. It's fun. And that's honestly the first scripts I wrote were TV scripts. I wrote TV spec scripts because I was trying to understand how things worked. And back in the day, you had to write spec TV scripts to kind of get any get reads basically. So I learned to writing TV. So I've always loved TV. So
So
anyway,
would you recommend for newer screenwriters nowadays too to have sort of like a diversity in their portfolio, have some spec scripts, but also do some TV as well too? Or can someone who just wants to focus on movies just do movies? What do you
yep,
think?
absolutely. People can just do movies.
Okay.
They don't need to, have a TV script. Um, it might be good to have an idea for a TV show and kind of have it thought out a little bit, like thought out enough that you could pitch it. Like, here's the concept, here's the main character, here's some supporting characters, here's what some of the episodes would be like, here's where the story engine is, like where the episodes come from, and um, like those kinds of things, but just in a very broad sense where you could pitch it. But do you need to have both? No. Um, and if you're wanting to write TV, you don't necessarily need a feature script. Like, write TV scripts. I would say, I mean, most of the time in TV, well, I should say they wanted you to write spec scripts, but when I was starting out, there was 3, 4 channels, if you counted Fox. Um, and now there's so many. So back in the day, everybody knew every show. They were familiar with every show. You could be like, "Oh, have you seen the latest episode of Lost?" Everybody's like, "Oh yeah, Lost is great." About it, everybody would talk about it for the week. It was must-see TV kind of things. But now you're like, I can't even keep track of which streaming service that show is on, much less, people be like, "Oh, have you watched that?" I'm like, "No." Have you watched that? No. Whereas, 15, 20 years ago, have you watched Lost? If you said no, they'd be like, get out of the room, because that's like a super popular show at the time. Well, now it's like, yeah, you can be like, okay, I know Stranger Things has been popular. It's ending, I think. Game of Thrones popular, or House of Dragon, whatever the new one is. Like, I haven't even watched House of the Dragon. Like, I don't even know. Like, there's so much out there. So a lot of what you need to do is write an original pilot. The trap, and I will say, I feel like writing a good pilot is harder than writing a good feature film script. Um, for the main reason that a feature film script story ends,
Mhm.
a pilot does not. So the story ends, but you're setting up so many other stories,
Right.
and you have to be able to set up, 100 other stories from one 40, 50-minute episode, or 20, 30-minute episode if you're writing a short form. So I, so if you're going to write TV, you got to write some original pilots. The hard part is it's hard to learn how to write TV writing an original pilot. There are things people may not know this. A lot of the studios do fellowships,
Mhm.
and most of the fellowships, they don't want an original pilot. They want you to write a TV spec. And
Mm.
they have a list of shows that they want you to pick from to write a spec. So, my recommendation is get one of those lists, pick a show off of there, write a spec off of one of those to learn how to write TV.
Okay.
So like, watch that show, be familiar with it, learn the characters. And the reason is you don't have to learn the characters. You don't have to create the worlds. You don't have to create the story engine where the stories come from. You just have to figure out how to tell a story in that 40, 50, 60 page, whatever the range is for that show. Um, and all of a sudden now you're like, okay, I'm starting to understand how to write TV, because it's very, very different than writing film. Film, like one simple example, film, unless it's a limited location. So, we're in one house for the whole movie. Okay. If it's not that, it's like a film. Generally, the unwritten rule is you don't want to be in the same location twice,
Hmm.
generally. So I might be in a house, but I might be in a house 10 times, but I'm in the bathroom, I'm in the bedroom, I'm in another bedroom, I'm in the hallway, I'm in the kitchen, I'm in the garage, I'm in the backyard, I'm in the front yard, I'm in the living room, I'm in the study. 10 places in one house, but all different places. So generally in film, you're never in the same place twice. Whereas TV, to keep the cost down, they have standing sets. So there are sets that are always there, and depending on the show, like if it's a network show, it's going to be like 30 to 50% of the scenes are in those standing sets. And you might have 50% of the scenes that are elsewhere. Um, but that's very different than writing film, right? Like it's not new locations all the time. You're revisiting the same location. This is what, if you watch any network show, you see the same place over and over again, and that keeps costs down because they can build the set on a stage, shoot all their scenes there, shoot it out, and then now they can go on location, and that helps them turn it around faster because TV is usually a faster turnaround. It's like there's a lot of reasons for that. So like that's just one like super simple basic difference between film and TV, but there's a lot. So anyway,
Awesome. No, this is great.
yeah, that's helpful.
I'm learning a lot of cool stuff tonight. So, and I
Oh,
know
good.
who's watching it. No, like I said, it's like I said, I've been really enjoying this conversation again because I don't get to talk screenwriting very much with
I
other people.
know, I know. Sometimes it's like, oh, I just want to talk screenwriting with somebody. My oldest daughter does creative writing, so we'll just start talking about stories. And if my other two are in the room, they eventually are just like peeling out. And me and my oldest, we're just like all into it and talking about stories, and the other two are like, I can't handle it anymore. So you do love getting to talk about story when you don't get to a whole lot. So it's good.
Um, so pivoting a little bit, but still sort of working with story, how do you feel AI is going to, if it's going to influence the story writing in Hollywood? Do you feel that's going to be an impact? I had a viewer yesterday text me and was like, he was so worried that they had this new Netflix thing that you can create your own story. And he said it's going to replace filmmaking. And I was like, they say that every time something new comes out. That's my opinion, but I wanted to hear what you think about that.
So, okay. Um, at the risk of being wiped out when AI takes over, um, I'm not a fan of AI.
Mhm.
Um, Now maybe that's because I grew up watching Terminator. Maybe, like I'm just imagining all the stuff that can happen. And, so yeah, maybe I am that, that old fogey that, just come on, man, just get on board. The thing with AI is by its very nature, at least right now,
Mhm.
it can only mimic.
Mhm.
It can't create. It takes things that exist and, so this thing over here that exists, this thing over here that exists, and puts them together in ways that we may not be familiar with, which is essentially what's called a remix.
Mhm.
Okay. So like, taking two songs, mashing them up and doing a remix and, that's essentially what it's doing. Now you can argue, and I'd probably agree with you on some level that it does require creativity to be able to do that. But that's not what AI is doing. It's mimicking, it's solving an algorithm to like put things together. Um, it's honestly, AI is more of a concern, at least right now, as far as actors and performances are concerned. Um, because AI can take a voice,
Mhm.
analyze it, remix it, and they can take a performance, analyze it, remix it, and make something that seems new. Um, but it's not the actor's performance. It's not their thing. Um, so that's a huge concern. I personally have not seen any AI attempt at screenwriting that's actually good,
Mhm.
honestly. Like it's all always a jumble. And even though there might be fun things about it, stories inherently require creativity to pull off a good one. And there are pieces of stories that you gotta have. So an AI might mimic movements or, stuff through a movie, but it's not gonna be satisfying. Because it's gonna just feel like I've already seen this.
Mhm.
Even though the premise might be unique. Now, AI might be able to come up with new premises and be like, oh, that's actually a really good way to try to attack that kind of a story. And then you discard AI and now you go write the story. Um, so that's probably where it's a little more helpful. Can it be helpful with other things? Sure. It can streamline tasks like emails and all that kind of stuff. But I personally don't touch it. I don't really like it. I might change my tune someday. But the other part of this, which is actually a bigger part, um, AI was one of the bigger points in the last writer's strike. Like there are provisions and precautions against it, and it actually penalizes the studios in very significant ways that almost make it cost prohibitive. It's just like you can't, it's just, I don't feel like, at least right now, that it's sustainable. I mean, if you started creating, some kind of, like a, mm, more like a, I'm blanking on the word, what you would describe the character of Data in Star Trek. It's not a cyborg, not
He's an android.
an android, right? So it's got some artificial intelligence inherent, and he does have to solve problems. He does have to do things, but even Data still has trouble creating things. He has trouble doing things because he doesn't have the emotion that goes with it. And this is the thing that a lot of people forget. Storytelling is all about emotion. It's about how the audience emotionally reacts to a story. And AI might be able to craft a story. They might be able to mimic some ways about the storytelling parts, but they're not going to be able to generate the emotions that it wants to, at least not for me, what I know of it, not the foreseeable future. And maybe it can. I could be totally wrong tomorrow. It's tech. I'm not totally in that world, but I honestly, I don't worry about it too much. I personally don't use AI. I know some people that do, but they just more use it as like premise generating things, or
Yeah.
how might I solve this one particular problem? Like, oh, that might be really kind of a good way to do it. But if you're writing your script using AI, the problem is you're never going to be able to take a note. You're never going to be able to rewrite it. And AI can't always solve the problem like a producer wants. They want to talk to somebody. Like, it's just, there's so many little hurdles in the way. I just don't, you know, will people try to abuse it? Of course. Of course. It's people. We make bad decisions. That's part of being human. But um, is it going to be effective? I don't know. I could be wrong. They could release a total AI movie and it does phenomenally. But I have a feeling that's going to be the exception rather than the rule.
Right. And so I'm probably a bigger supporter of AI, but I see it more as a tool. So
Yeah.
the way I look at it is like screenwriting software. It's sort of like it's the next sort of iteration of screenwriting software.
Mhm.
Again, you have to, as a creative, I pair with that to create
Right.
my story. It's
Right.
not, I just don't say, hey, because I've done this before. I took ChatGPT and said, hey, write me a movie. It was the worst thing, like you said, the worst thing
Ever.
that's
Yeah.
ever come out. But like I said, I knew I was blocked in one of my scripts that I was writing. I was like, I can't really figure this out. Hey, here's what's going on in the script. Can you give me 5 different ideas that I potentially could use? And that was great because I didn't use any of them, but I was like,
Right.
oh, I could do something like this, and then that
Right.
it was for me. It's more like what you were saying before. It's a writing aid.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
and I think if you think about it like that and then, use it how you're comfortable using it, how you want to use it, I think that's fine. I think if you're starting to use it where you're like, oh, write this dialogue or write this scene and da da da, it's like, okay, now you're not writing it. And,
correct.
I haven't seen an actual contract lately, but I've I kind of have a feeling that there's some clause in there that when you're signing your side, you're stating like, "Hey, I wrote this, not AI, not," because there's penalties now. So it's like it's not worth
Right.
um doing it. So, if you want to write one script and hope to, hit a home run, whatever. If that's what you want to do, knock yourself out. And good luck. I don't think you're going to have much success, but maybe. But if you're wanting to do this for the long haul and like you have to learn how to do those things yourself. You have to learn. And yeah, if the tool's helpful, absolutely use it. But, um, and people use different things, people use music and, drawing and watching other movies and you get inspired by another, oh, this happened in this other movie. I could kind of like adapt it and do that's the same thing. That's all AI is doing, really.
Right.
It's just doing it faster than what you can do it. So it watches all the movies at once and then gives you five things. You got to go spend 90 million hours watching all the movies, to come up with five things. So it's, can it be helpful? Yes. Um, but I'm not,
Yeah. And
maybe I'm naive, but I'm not really worried about it
no.
taking over or eliminating jobs. So,
And that's what I was telling this particular viewer, I said, you don't need to worry about this because I said there's always been people have been worried. I mean, so I just got Sherlock Holmes because I'm working on a audio drama for Sherlock Holmes. I was reading through that, and back in that day, they had Penny Dreadfuls that came out. People were worried
mhm.
about that. Oh, that's going to take over all the writing space, and it's like
Yep.
we're always worried about some type of media that's going to come through and affect everything else. And at the end of the day,
Right.
it's a much ado about nothing. But
Right. Yeah. Cause a story is a story. I mean, the mediums do change. That's for sure true. The mediums change, but story's a story. And if history shows us anything, society has always wanted people that can tell stories. So,
bingo.
yeah.
Yeah, and people, and like you were saying before, people are going to resonate with people's stories. The AI
Mhm.
can never have a person's experience.
Right. Right.
And so that's why I always tell people, I said, AI is a great tool, I think, but you have
Hmm.
to look at it that you're still creating the story. You are still
Right.
the master in charge of that story.
Yep.
Again, it's just like screenwriting software to me. So
Mm.
speaking of
Yeah.
that, since that's what
Yeah.
I do mainly on my channel, I have to ask you, as I do all my guests, what screenwriting software do you use?
Um, so yeah, I started to joke about something, but I'll save it for later. Um, I use for my first drafts, and I started doing this mm, 3-ish years ago, might be 2 years ago. I don't know. Time's kind of been a blur for me the last couple of years. So might have been 3 years ago. I started using Arc Studio Pro for my first draft. Um, and that's primarily because I like that planning tool that they have. It's easy to organize it how you want. It's kind of like a storyboard that you can kind of like move stuff around a little easier and organize it how you want to organize it. And then when you're ready to start writing, it just rolls right into script and organize them. If you've put in scene headings, it goes ahead and does all the slug lines and stuff for you. Um, so I do like that for my first draft because I just keep a lot of my notes and stuff in there, and you can highlight things a little different. Um, but then I move to Fade In Pro, which is what I use for the rest of the writing process. And I've used Fade In for a long time. You know, at least 15 years, at least. Um, don't remember if I had it before I was in California before I finished grad school, but um, I might have bought it when I was in grad school. Um, and I've just used it and I like it because It's not distracting.
Mm.
It's one fee, $79.95, I think, is the latest I saw.
Yep. Yep.
Um, updates are free,
Hmm.
unlike Final Draft, where you got to pay for every update, and they just like intentionally make things to make you pay for a new update, which totally annoys me. So Fade In's affordable. Um, it's stable. It doesn't crash like Final Draft. I just laugh when I see people commenting on social media. Hey, I'm having trouble with Final Draft crashing. Does anybody know how to help? I'm like, yeah, I'll go buy Fade In. So keep Final Draft from crashing. Now, to be fair, to be transparent, I have owned copies of Final Draft. I've never, technically, I've never bought them. Um, there was one time I knew I was going to need a copy of Final Draft when I was in grad school. And I was like, I don't want to pay $300 for, software. Because I was already using, I don't remember what I had at the time. I was using something else. Um, Story Writer or something. I can't remember the name of it. Um, anyway, I knew I was going to need Final Draft. I went online and just did a search for upcoming contests and banged out a script, submitted a script, placed in a contest, got a free copy of Final Draft. Like I didn't pay for it. And then, but it was like an upgraded version or something. And I just, like the final, so this is one of the benefits of where I live. Like Final Draft's offices are literally like a 5-minute drive down the road. So I just took my copy and went in and knocked on the door and went in and was like, hey, I won a contest and they gave me this, but I don't have the original. Can I like swap it out? They're like, oh yeah, sure. They swapped it out, gave me, that was all fine. I've done that twice because I needed it 2 different times. I've never bought one, never bought a copy of Final Draft. Um, it might sound like I'm on a soapbox. I'm kind of on a soapbox, but it's not railing against Final Draft. It's railing against the industry myth that you have to have Final Draft to write a screenplay. Nobody shares FDX files unless you're in production. And if you're in production, somebody's paid you a bunch of money, you can go afford to buy Final Draft. You don't need Final Draft. That is 100% a lie. You don't. Several professional writers I know don't use it. So you don't need it. If you don't want to spend the $80 to get Fade In, I recommend free software of Writer's Solo, which is the free version of Writer's Duet. It's great. I've used it in a pinch, like somewhere, and I, either have a laptop or I'm somewhere and I want to write something down or write a scene or whatever. I just download a free version, write it, save it as a PDF, bring it back, import it into Fade In, bada bing, bada boom, done. So Writer Solo is really great if you need a free version. So there's free versions out there. If you're writing a script in Microsoft Word, and this is where people get mad at me, but I'm like, if you're writing a script in Microsoft Word, you don't really want to be a screenwriter. There's free versions out there. Go get a free version of software. It's a tool that helps you write better. People are like, oh, well, it's the format stuff. No, the format's a storytelling tool. It's a tool that helps you tell the story. Learn how to use the format in ways that benefit how you tell the story. People are like, oh, there's rules of format and the software does all that. No, it's not. There's guidelines of software and you got to play by those. And some of those can be bent, some can be broken. Can the reader track with your story and what's going on? Yes or no? Is it distracting how you formatted things? Yes or no? Are you following expectations and general conventions? Yes or no? If you're doing those things, use the free software, use Fade In, use Arc Studio Pro, use Final Draft if you really want to. I just don't like spending the $300 and the $100 every year to upgrade it. So I just don't.
I don't blame you. Yeah, no, they don't talk to me anymore. So,
Yeah, Final Draft. Yeah.
uh,
No, and they feel like they don't need to. They're, a little hoity-toity, and it's fine. That there's people that love their stuff and love their product and totally use it and, like swear by it.
yep.
I know other writers are like, I really love their outlining tool and all this. I'm just like, I don't need all the stuff it does. There's some things that it does that's helpful. Like character breakdowns and scene breakdowns and things like that. But Fade In Pro does the same stuff. So I'm like, I don't need it. Like, I don't need all the extra things I'm paying for. I just need it I'm writing a screenplay. I'm not making a budget for an independent film. and then there's software for that too. So it just,
Exactly.
I don't know. That's my thing. But Arc Studio Pro for first draft is really great. Um, so
Yeah, I loved using. I've used. That's what I tend to do on my channel. Is I tend to talk about different types of screenwriting or writing
mhm.
software, and then, um, yeah, I've tried all of them. So yeah, Arc
Yeah,
Studio Pro works great.
yeah,
I own a copy of Fade In Pro. I also own a copy of Final Draft, and yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and if you're, the one benefit of Final Draft is if you're writing something that's not um TV or film, there are some other formats and templates that's included that are helpful, that are not always with some of the other software. You kind of, if you're going to write something different, you kind of got to look and see if there's something there. I think Fade In has a graphic novel template, I
they do.
think.
They do.
Um,
Yeah.
but I don't remember if they have like a radio drama, or I don't remember if they have um, video game templates. I don't think Final Fade In does. Final Draft might. I don't know. So, because it's different.
Celtic
There's, some different
Celtic
formats for
does.
those.
Celtic's got video games. That's one of their big thing for Celtic is writing
Yeah,
video games.
yeah, that's true. Because a lot of the video game studios have Celtics, so yeah, they use that a lot. But they have a big push for like enterprise licensing and stuff, so it's cheaper if a bunch of people are doing it. It's almost cost prohibitive year over year, if you're just doing it by yourself. Arc Studio Pro can get that way, uh, but I just I like Arc Studio Pro, so I just keep it. It's like 80 or 90 bucks a year, and I just keep it. So
Exactly. Um, let's see here. So, so we might deviate a little bit from uh or for right now, what are you sort of so you're writing stuff now and you're not teaching right now. So what are you doing in terms of
yeah,
your
mostly just like I do a lot of contract stuff, do a lot of script consulting, do a lot of doing my YouTube channel, got coaching I do with that. So we have calls every other week. I'm working with writers with that. Um, just busy all the time, basically. Yeah, I just kind of, just running around, and then I've got, my youngest is graduating high school in a couple of weeks and all. So it's, got two in college, and it's just, lots of life. So, but yeah, I love screenwriting, and I love the teaching of it. And that's one reason I do the YouTube channel, because it's like, it's fun. I can kind of teach, and then I have my classes and stuff that people can subscribe to and do and work through, mostly at their own pace, but that's up to them. So
yeah, and talking a little bit just more about YouTube too. You've seen phenomenal growth. I was looking at one of your posts from last year, and you were just celebrating 2,000 subscribers, and now this year you're getting close to almost six already. And it's not.
just as we're recording this, I hit 5,200 today. So that's kind of cool. Like it's kind of humbling in a way, because it's like, I mean, and everybody that subscribes, this is maybe new to some of you watching this, but everybody that subscribes does not watch the videos. They've watched a few, and then they've subscribed, and then they've moved on. That's fine. People go through different seasons, and they need different things for different purposes. And my channel is geared towards screenwriting, obviously, but I have several people that have interacted with me that write novels or short stories, whatever, because I do talk a lot about just stories and how stories work and what you need to have stories. And um, so yeah, so it's very humbling and kind of cool. And I don't I don't draw a whole lot of attention to it anymore, but it is humbling. What's hard is like, people comment on videos. I can't keep up with the comments anymore. I try, and I know, some people are like, "Are you even reading my stuff?" I'm like, I pretty much read every comment. I just don't have time to reply to it. Sometimes I'm not where I'm at, or, I don't like replying to on YouTube comments when I'm on my phone. So I'll see the comment come through and read it and be like, oh, I should respond to that. And then life happens and I just don't get to. So I do try to like go through bouts where I'm like going through like a ton of them at a time, but it's hard. And I hate that because, you know, I feel like I'm kind of a personable guy and I want to be helpful and I want to do that. It's like, I just don't have the time. So I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm having to kind of figure out, okay, how am I managing some things? You know, I'm getting more and more script consultations and, you know, that just takes time and, you know, reading a script and notes and calls and all that. And, um, you know, I do them different than a lot of people do. A lot of people will just like give written feedback. I don't. We have a conversation kind of like this and we talk about the script and pull it out and here's my notes and, you know, just break it down. Um, and I love doing that. It's fun, but it's also like, you know, there's some says I will do a script consultation at 6 a.m. my time. I'm in LA. So, you know, somebody on the East Coast is wanting a consultation in the morning. It's like, I'm like, I could start at 6. I can't, you know, they're like, okay, I can start at 9, you know, so there's those things, but it's, you know, so there's a little bit of growing pains right now, but it's good growing pains. And I think it'll benefit people that are watching and that want to learn and do things. So I'm trying to figure out other ways to do my coaching program. That's just a little different and that still honors the people that are there and they're still, you know, getting all the stuff they want. But that, you know, I am probably going to be changing that up come the fall, you know, so, um, you know, people are interested. I'm kind of trying to mention that through my emails and stuff, but, you know,
So
so
do you have an email list then for because I was looking through your stuff. Do you have an email list that you can subscribe to for your channel and stuff?
If you go onto my
Okay.
learning portal and just create an account, it will automatically
Okay.
do one. You don't have to buy anything. You just like click sign up. But that's not super clear. So that's like some of the like growing pains. Like, oh, I should clear that up. Like I should make that a little more clear. Um, and people can always email me, just ask at bigredstripe.com. You can always just send me an email and I think that's how you found me anyway.
Exactly.
We started that way, so that was good.
So how did you come up with your channel name?
So, I wanted something that was like production-y sounding. And a lot of production companies are either like one or maybe 3 words. Most of them are like 2, but it's usually like an adjective and a noun. And I had a car at the time that had a big red stripe down the middle. And I was like, red stripe. And I don't really drink. So I started like just doing an online search for red stripe, like, oh, red stripe beer. I probably shouldn't do that. It's like big red stripe. It was a big red stripe. I'll do big red stripe. So that's what I did. It's not super flashy or anything, but it was kind of fun. So,
And you did a great job with branding too, because I mean you have a big red stripe in all of your
mhm,
thumbnails. So I think
stuff.
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I tried to be pretty intentional about that. And at first, when I first started, I had on the thumbnail I had a red stripe at the top and the bottom. But on YouTube, if you've watched part of a video, there's already a red stripe on the bottom
Yeah.
and it was like covered. So it made it look like if my thumbnail popped up, oh, I've already watched that. I don't need to watch that. And I was like, no. So I took it off the bottom and just left it at the top. So it's fine. So I've just kept that because it works for me and people know that's mine. I've gone back and forth, you know. So I think you and yours, you have, you know, images of you on your thumbnail. And I went back, I did that for a while and then I didn't, and I did again, and now I'm not again. And I don't know. I hate, you know,
It's hard.
it's hard. You know, people think, oh, you know, I gotta chase the views or whatever. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what? That's not, if people are interested in the content, because I feel like there's quality in the content, that they'll watch. And, if they want fluff or some, you know, I don't know, movie review thing that's just kind of like either like super heady and theoretical or like no substance to it. I'm like, they'll go do that anywhere. And most of those people aren't writing screenplays anyway. I'm like, I do get comments like, why doesn't your channel have like 100,000 viewers and And I'm like, because that's not who I'm trying to appeal to. I'm trying to help people who actually want to make a go of it, not people who just like, oh, I had this idea for a movie I want to write. Like, no, I'm not. That's not what this is about. If you want that, like, that's great. But that's not where I'm helpful to you. That's not where I can be helpful to you. And when I was starting out, there were so many, and there are still, shills, just people that are just like trying to take advantage of new writers. And I don't do that. I'm like, no, this is what it is. And the things I charge are mostly for my time that I'm spending and the resources I've created, which took a lot of time to create and time for me to learn. It's like, hey, this took me, somebody's like, hey, I want to learn how to build a good character in 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, I can show you, but it took me 10 years how to learn to build a good character. So it's not going to be $20, and they're like, well, I want it $20. I'm like, okay, then go somewhere else. Cause that's just not, I, I really pride myself on, I will get you to where you can write scripts that get you meetings, that get you in the door.
Mhm.
I can get you there. But you also, whoever works with me, they have to know like they got to put in the work and they got to do the work. And if you're not putting in the work, you're just not going to get there. So this industry is too hard. There's too many people clamoring, and you're not really competing against them as far as like your story goes. Like one story doesn't really compete against another one. That's not really how it works. It's not like, oh, this story's better than this one. That's not always the factor. Sometimes it's like, okay, story A might be arguably better than story B,
Mhm.
but story B, we can market a whole lot easier, and that's going to get people in the theater. So we're going to do story B. And you're like, but my story is so good. It's like, yeah, but it's about a high school teacher in Midwestern Oklahoma and trying to teach his students how to do AP physics. Like, nobody's going to go see that. Maybe, but that's not a marketable film. So, um, you gotta work hard. And what you're really competing against is the work ethic of other people. That's what you're competing against, so that's a hard thing for people to learn. They're like, oh, well, I want they think screenwriting is like I'll use this example a lot. They think it's like an ATM. Like I write a screenplay, I submit it to Hollywood, I get a check back.
Ding.
Yep. And not how it works. So just not how it works. But
Um, so do you tend to, since you started your YouTube channel, is that um the main driver for most of your coaching calls and for
mhm.
is that
I
so
don't
that
I don't really market anywhere else. I mean, I've got people I have had people find me just by doing searches on YouTube, searching for screenplay this, or not on YouTube, just on Google search or whatever, just, and they'll land on my site, not from YouTube.
okay.
And, I don't, there's lots of tracking. People know there's tracking data, so it's helpful for me to know like where it's coming from, but I don't know who's doing it. Like I couldn't tell you that, but I do know like, oh, they came here from this web page or they came here from this link or whatever. So I do have people that find me, but the majority are people that have watched my channel, that know me, that have gotten to know me, that trust and know I'm gonna not blow smoke at them, that I'm gonna tell them what's working, I'm gonna tell them what's not,
Right.
uh, that I'm gonna mostly and initially focus on the story first and then the storytelling. 'Cause most of the problem people have is the story is broken. Um, and then we can figure out how to tell it in the best way. So
What resources would you suggest for a new screenwriter, um, in terms of either a book, or, you know, what,
hmm,
what would
that's a
be
really good question. I think, honestly, what I would say is I would say find a screenwriting book that interests you. If you're brand new, capitalize on the passion you have and find a book that interests you. Either, do a quick search of like top 10 best screenwriting books and see what crops up at the top of most of the lists, and then look at them and make a decision and pick one. You don't got to pick a bunch, just pick one, maybe two, but pick one. I'd say start off picking one. I'll tell you why in a second. Um, then I would say find a movie that you're familiar with that people would say is a good movie. Not you would say, people would say that's a good movie. I'm not talking about like Academy Award winning film or anything. I'm talking like what's a good movie? Um, and there's a ton of them. If anybody wants to know, like, I mean, they could probably email you, they could email me, Jake, what's a good movie? Here's one. Um, so like and if people want a place to start, I would say with a movie, and I'm still circling around on this, I'd say, um, what would I say is like a really great structural movie? Um, we'll be family friendly. I would say Zootopia is like a greatly structured film. And you can find the script online. So watch the film, read the script, read the screenwriting book. Um, that would be helpful. Now, the reason I say one book, not a bunch, because a lot of popular books about screenwriting mix together the elements of story and the elements of storytelling.
Mhm.
And they are not the same thing. But several books will kind of give a formula of like, here's how a story is structured. You know, it's this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Some of them even give you page numbers. This should happen on page 5. This should happen on page 17, whatever. Um, the thing is, if you start to read too many books initially, it's just going to be confusing. And what you're really trying to do is start to get an understanding of how stories work,
Mhm.
and start to get an understanding of the terminology that's being used. Um, and then from there, you can, it will start to become a little more clear for you about like what things you could do. Um, there's a book I'm going to look here real. For anybody that's just looking for a book, I would say one of the best ones that I have found is a book by David Howard and Edward Mabley called The Tools of Screenwriting,
Okay.
a writer's guide to the craft and elements of a screenplay. And that one's really good because it does at least break down, here are tools of story and there's some tools of storytelling. It doesn't really talk about how stories work, um, but it does give you a good understanding of a lot of the tools. And that one's like really helpful. And there's it does do some breakdowns of films and like what's working and how it's working. But that's a really great book. If people are just looking for one to do that's kind of sort of off the beaten path, but everybody that's kind of done screenwriting for a while probably has it on their shelf. I think I do have it on my shelf too. So like it's a good one. So
Okay.
that would be a good one to get.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the stuff that you offer. What sort of classes do you offer and that type of stuff?
Yeah, so I do The main thing is coaching I do, which is I call the Navigator program. Um, and the purpose of that is to help you hone the process of writing a screenplay so you can get to kind of writing a screenplay and having written one or two to being able to write one on a schedule that's at a quality that could like get you meetings, that could place in contests, that could that kind of thing. So we talk a lot about different tools and we kind of work through that one. We meet every other Friday.
Mhm.
We don't meet in December, but we meet every other Friday and we talk about the process. And we typically work through the process of writing a script twice a year. So
Hmm.
if you follow, you would write 2 scripts a year. Um, and then as you go, you actually start to get faster where you can actually start to generate it a little tighter. I mean, just for frame of reference, people that may not be aware, if you're hired, let's say I go in and have a script, I get a meeting, go in, producer's like, hey, we really love this, but we actually have this other one that we want to talk to you about. We really like it. We think you'd be a great writer for it. Here's kind of the premise and some stuff. Come back in 2 weeks and talk to us about how you do it. You go away, you look at all their stuff, you come back, you kind of pitch your take. If they choose to hire you, you typically get a basic contract, and that's normally 12 weeks from that point to when they expect an actual draft, not a first draft, a final finished. Here's the actual draft, 12 weeks. Um, so if you want to write professionally, you have to get to where you can tighten that process and where you can jump in because they may give you a treatment. They may give you a whole first draft and be like, here's the whole thing. Here's stuff we like. Here's stuff we don't. And you have to be able to step back and go, oh, okay, I know what to do now. Whereas if you've only written 1 or 2 screenplays and you don't have a process that's honed, you got all kinds of problems and trying to get that. And it might turn out fine, but more than likely it's not. So you gotta hone your process with that. Um, so that's that one. The other one that's a little that would be kind of before that. Although everybody that's in the Navigator gets access to this, which is what I call my fast track course. Fast track is a work at your own pace. It is a bunch of tools of screenwriting. So tools of story, tools of storytelling. We talk about just kind of the general concepts of how stories work. We talk about dialogue. We talk about building characters. We talk about sequences and planning. We talk about how to organize your script. We talk about scenes and how they work and dynamics within like the whole thing. It's essentially, I took a lot of the stuff from when I was teaching grad school, a 2 year program and condensed it down into like 70, 80 lessons. I don't remember how many there are. It's robust. It's robust. Um, but within that, there's like, here's a movie to watch. Here's a link for the script for this movie. So all the examples from each section rely on one movie. So you're reading scripts, you're watching movies, there's homework, you have to work through stuff, you learn all the tools, how to do them. You can sign up for different things if you want feedback from me. So people, some of the homework assignments they'll send in, and then as they work through the course, I give feedback on some of those or at the end. So that one's very, very robust. And that's just a great way if, people want to do that. That one is just a monthly thing that you can start and stop whenever you want. So you can do it and plow through. If you're really taking your time, it's going to take you anywhere between 5 to 8 months to just kind of work through it, depending on how much time you have to devote.
Mhm.
Um, so, just you can kind of like keep that in mind. But I've had a couple of people that like start it and then stop and then pick it back up and do another month or two and then stop. And other people that just, do it and keep replaying and watching sections or what, like it's all fine. It's at your own pace. So, um, that's I really like that. You know, I need to modify that a little bit, but, um, so those are the two main things that people do. I also do script consultation. So my script consulting, you choose the feature length, hour-long pilot, half-hour pilot. Um, you send the script, I read it, I make notes on the first 10-ish pages, um, actually on the script,
Mhm.
which I share with the person at the end. And then we'll get on a Zoom call and we talk about the script. I talk about what's working. I talk about what's not working. We go through the first, pages where I've got the notes and I explain the notes that I'm making. Part of that's because my handwriting is not always great. So, and I
Been
record
there.
this, by the way. Yeah. So I record them all. Um, and so, and then I also like ask and we talk about, what are the questions you have? Like, why did you want to do the consulting? What are and some people are like, I feel like the scene's not working, or, oh, I don't know where it's off the rails, but I don't know where, sometimes it's very specific. Well, I want to know in this scene, if this is working, I want to know if this scene, this is working. So we'll cover the gamut and I make notes of all those. So we make sure we talk about all those things because I want it to be worthwhile. Um, and then at the end, I'll email back the script with my notes. I send a link for the recorded video, so people don't feel like they have to take notes while we're
Yeah.
talking, just so they can participate in the conversation. Um, and then you can always go back and, rewatch sections or whatever. Uh, but so those are the three main things. I do have a book. It's just digital. I'm working on expanding it, but I just haven't had time to devote like I need to finish that up. But it's a book on story structure and literally how stories work, because there's not a book out there like that. There's books that talk about stories, but they don't talk about structure and how structure works, especially from a screenwriting, filmmaking point of view. Like how are they structured and what's happening. Um, so I do have that. That's less than $10, so anybody can grab that. And you were asking about the email list. Like if you go and buy the book, then you're automatically on the email list. So there you go. It's a win-win. Um, so those are the main things. I've thought about doing other things. Um, and I'm thinking about building out my fast track course a little bit more to talk about um, to just kind of walk through writing your first screenplay. Like what steps could you do if you like want to write one, but not sure how? So, you go through all the tools, here's all the tools, and then you can do this other part. So I've been thinking about that. I don't know, and I haven't had the time to really do that because I'm kind of in the midst of overhauling my coaching thing to make it a little more meaningful, but also, I mean, if anybody is ever interested in watching this, where you're interested in doing my coaching program, see, we're beginning of June of 2024. More than likely by end of August at the latest, probably beginning of August, my navigator program is going to change. So like right now, once you sign up, you're like in until I just, you know, go toes up and, die, or until
Don't
I
be doing that.
retire. Yeah, I'm not planning on doing that anytime soon. Um, so you're in forever. After August, probably, um, it's a limited time frame. So you're just signing up for specific time, a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on what outcome you're wanting. So, because some people are like, hey, I just want to write for fun. I want to learn and maybe win a contest or write it good enough where I can go shoot it myself. That's one thing. If I want to be able to write like big blockbusters for Hollywood, okay, that's a whole other trajectory. So that's going to take a little more time. So that way people can kind of choose and determine their their outcome in a sense. So, which I'm excited about. I think it'll be good. But so anyway, if anybody's interested, but people can always go jump on the fast track and,
Yeah.
do that and kind of see like, oh, this is what it's like. And, so get a flavor. So,
Awesome. Awesome. Well, is there a question I should have asked you tonight that you're dying to answer?
oh, hmm. I was just kind of chatting. A question, which is an important thing, I will say, is, if you and this is true pretty much of every writer I know, work really hard to be in the moment. Don't be trying to do the 20 other things that I know everybody's got to do. I got 20 other things. I still got to finish recording and editing my own YouTube video for this week after this call. So like I got stuff to do, right? Like everybody's got stuff to do. But people are important. And if you're taking time to have a conversation with somebody, have a conversation with them. So is there anything I wanted you to ask me?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. No, I can't think of anything.
That's all
Like,
right.
I feel like I should answer this question, but alas, fail. Jake's fail.
No, it's not a
So
fail. No, like I said, it's that means we've had a good conversation. I mean, we've
yeah,
talked
no, it's good.
a
Is
lot.
there's anything else you were wanting to ask me? I mean, you asked me several questions, but just not even just like whatever. Is there something else you're just dying to know, or like, what's this about Jake?
But like I said, thanks again for the conversation.
Oh,
I really
you're very
enjoyed it.
welcome. It has been my pleasure, truly, Paul. It has been my pleasure. So
It's
thank
been
you
a lot of fun. Like I
for
said,
the invite. Yeah, it was good.
that's why I like doing these because, like I said, I get to know people. And hey, everybody, I just want to say thank you again, Jacob, for coming on to the show to talk about your experience and stuff like that. It was really helpful. I hope you found value in this as well, too. I apologize for some of the Zoom drop frames that we had. If you like anything more about Jacob and his classes and stuff, I put it in the first comment in the video as well as in the description as well, too. Give his stuff a check out. He's a real great guy, and I think you'll find his stuff really good. Until the next video.